Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to this very special edition of Splendid Isolation, which is looking back on our first year and all the things that have gone on, and also the stuff that may happen in the future, perhaps. And I'm very happy to have as our special guest this evening Richard and Matt, who, along with myself, founded the channel. And as usual, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. Okay, that was the sailor's hornpipe, and the illustration was Royal Navy sailors in the Crimean War doing a sailor's hornpipe to a load of amused Turks. And in general, the Royal Navy sailors' opinion of the Turks' courage in the Crimean War was not very high, to be honest with you. But anyway. Hello to Richard and hello to Matt, my guests. How are you going, guys?
All right.
Good, thank you.
All right. We were talking pre the stream about some of the stuff that's gone on over the last year. Richard, do you want to take it away from where we were at?
Oh, shit, where were we?
I think we've got on to the right. We're finally starting to realise that the lockdowns and forced vaccinations.
Oh, sorry, Ataman was saying that since COVID, the right's been in stasis. Do you want to pick up on that point, Ataman, and go from there?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been a little bit. Like, I know, like some people have done, meetups and stuff like that, but that's kind of all come quite recently, and I think that was mainly because people have kind of picked up on this. That I mean, like if you ever sort of have to develop anything, movement or personal project or anything, there's always this bit where you have to go through like theory, but you can only do that for so long. You then have to actually put some actual practice in, get something actually going, and then take away from your experiences. But the right just seems to be stuck in just discussing theory over and over and over and over again. It never gets out of that. It never sort of gets anything off the ground or attempts anything. Even like if you look at sort of like I'm not sure if I really want to bring these up, but like PA, even they've sort of like largely been sort of in stasis, and they're sort of sort of any real political movement they could do, if they were ever actually interested in that, they just can't or won't at the moment.
So when you talk about the right being in stasis, you were actually referring to, and I'll put it bluntly, these online communities, right? Rather than just the actual broader picture of the right.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, it works for the broader picture of the right as well, because even like the Spectator. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone would even consider that right wing anymore. But
No.
I mean, I used to subscribe to the Spectator, and I used to go. They used to do like talks with Douglas Murray and stuff like that. You could go to. I mean, even that's largely been almost entirely put on hold.
Oh yeah, but I think that's because of COVID. Literally,
Yes.
that's genuine logistical problems where actually they can't organise a meetup because it would be in contravention of COVID.
Yeah, but then the problem you get is that the people that own the means of communication, which is not us, they can just keep relentlessly pushing. All of their platforms are largely unimpeded. Their means of communication are all still open to them, and it just seems to be the right that gets shafted by this.
Does anyone even regard the Spectator as a right wing anymore? Because I don't. I mean, I used to read it too, and no, not anymore.
Well, I mean, they if you were to pick it up every week, you'd still find there's quite a few good articles that you probably take quite a lot from, but within the online space, all you ever hear about them is just the occasional left-wing cringe that gets posted in there.
Well, the thing that comes to my mind is Fraser Nelson, who
Yes.
was, a Spectator writer, and quite frequently will publish articles saying, it's vital that we give amnesty to, all of these people that live and reside in the UK illegally. But I've always seen the Spectator as being not so much a conservative publication, but actually more of a Tory rag. And of course, I think you have to make a distinction between the Tories and conservatism. So obviously the Tory party contains far more liberals than conservatives. So it doesn't surprise me that the Spectator has a whole raft of very liberal, persuasive articles and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say that they're in a funny place. Well, they were in a funny place about a year ago. I haven't read them in a while, but they were putting out articles talking about sort of like the way sort of diversity hiring was affecting the police force, and they were sort of saying the sort of stuff that you might hear on, let's say a sort of typical schizo right wing stream or something, and what was the other thing they were talking about? I saw a year ago. I forget what it was, but yeah, and recently as well they had that American woman talking about Lionel Shriver talking about sort of the minoritization of sort of ethnic Brits and stuff like that, and so they're in this sort of funny place right now where but then at the same time they hired this old Observer columnist who just spurgs out about Brexit all the time. So they're in this sort of really sort of odd position at the moment. I don't know. I kind of feel they've wanted to try and move on from the Tory rag thing, and they're kind of stuck in some sort of paradox.
I don't know. I mean, what do you? I mean, I know that academic aging, for example, talks a lot about, in inverted commas, the Tory boys, and I know some of these people. I know that Matt does too, and I don't know any of them who are actually Tory supporters. Not one, really. So,
well, I mean, he actually, when he defined it, he specifically said it doesn't have to be someone who supports the Tory party. It just has to be someone that's doing the Tories' job for them, which is to be nihilistic and to counter-signal the right. But he changes who's in that group all the time. I mean, because you're referring to Royal Oak, aren't you?
I know Royal Oak, and I don't dislike Royal Oak for sure.
Well, see, that's the thing. He hasn't considered Royal Oak a member of the Tory boys in months because he hasn't spoken to him or argued with him.
Well,
but
that's
similarly,
funny. That's funny. He named him about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, but the thing is he then had a falling out with that guy from John Slot, Joz. So now he swapped out one of the original 6 Tory boys for Joz.
Okay. Right,
so he just seems to change it to whoever he's just disagreed with at the time.
I mean, I had an argument on John's Discord with a dude, like, because you guys know I'm doing this stream tomorrow morning about Jonathan Bowden, and I had an argument because this guy turned around and said, "Oh, Jonathan Bowden economically was a Marxist," which is absolute bollocks for A, and B, Jonathan Bowden didn't give two shits about economics, like many of us don't. So, it's and I was actually able to put a video from Richard's channel on YouTube onto the Discord, where this dude who was talking after Jonathan Bowden had sadly died pointed out that Jonathan Bowden had no very strong opinions about economics one way or the other. So it's quite funny, really.
Well, I mean, I suppose he's a bit of an interesting case though, because he would often say, like, I mean, what's that particularly famous bit where he says, "Oh, what is it? Dominance is natural and therefore good," and he kind of says some stuff along those lines. He's kind of very much a sort of kill or be killed type. But then at the same time, he does also talk about like socialism and stuff like that. I think he just understands that stuff's popular.
Well,
that really, if a party wants to be successful, it needs to be economically left wing and socially right wing.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's one thing he did say, which I thought was quite sane. I saw where it was coming from. Is that the only real socialism is patriotism, and that was quite a sane and sensible thing to say, because on that level, most of us would agree with it. Although, you can argue if it's socialism. I mean, like, I wouldn't piss on a socialist who's on fire, but I mean, but in general terms, yeah, you can see where he was coming from. But
doesn't he say nationalism rather than patriotism? I can't remember.
I think he said patriotism, but you could be right, mate. Listen,
no, it is patriotism that he says.
Right.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. I see. This is why you know this stuff more than I do. But and I've spent the last week doing not much else apart from reading one book about watching every Jonathan Bowden stream there is, pretty much. So, and I've still got about 5 hours to go.
I'd actually just like to go back to the thing that you said about the guy sort of criticizing Bowden for being a Marxist. Because it's interesting, because I saw one of my Twitter mutuals retweeted somebody called Economic Erudites, who said
that might be the same bloke.
That you should step over Jonathan Bowden because he's a socialist. And I would just say to people of this kind of economic persuasion, what exactly has the neoliberal economic agenda done for the UK? Because I recently made a tweet where I said we've had 40 years of the Tories sniffing their own farts about the wonders of Thatcherism and neoliberal economics. But what have we actually got as a country to show for that?
Yep.
We've got the lowest GDP per capita in Western Europe and 10 of the poorest regions of Western Europe in the UK. Yep. So I actually don't know what these Tories and free marketeers are actually fighting for, because the evidence is that most of continental Europe is doing far better than we are, and we've had 40 years of this bullshit.
Yeah, no, look, I totally agree with you on that one, Richard. My answer to this dude was, and I think it was the same dude, by the way, was that Britain should have abandoned free trade at the end of the 1870s, because by that stage it wasn't doing Britain any good. And that I absolutely agree, because I care about defence, as you guys know, that you have to have certain industries in the UK that are protected. I would much rather those protected industries were private rather than nationalised, because I'm not a socialist or a Marxist. But I would much rather have a situation where Britain had no mass immigration and some protected industries, rather than the situation we have now, where Britain has like virtually unlimited mass immigration and no industry at all, because it's all been outsourced to various parts of Asia. I mean, to me, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you totally, Richard, on that one.
Well, it wasn't just outsourced; it was deliberately destroyed by Thatcher.
Yeah.
Because there was this dream that we were going to pivot away from industry and become this monumental service economy. But it's interesting in hindsight, you look back and think, well, actually, all of the new service industries, tech, none of that really happened in the UK. I mean, yeah, there's some tech here, but it's primarily dominated by the US.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the other point is that the one thing that I notice about service industries is that you can't really scale it. You can't scale the productivity of selling insurance or shuffling paper about in the city of London. If you've got a big factory, you can scale that and you can actually create wealth.
You look,
So
my argument with Thatcher, and I voted for Thatcher twice because I'm an old bastard. My argument with Thatcher is that, like, the UK coal mines were immensely inefficient. And like when I lived in South Africa, which I did for 15 years, I knew many Welsh and other British miners who had moved there after Mrs. Thatcher closed down the mines. And all of them, with no exceptions, turned around and told me that the South African mines were more automated and had more machinery than any British mine they ever worked in.
I think coal mines were a red herring.
But hang on, what I'm trying to say here, Matt, is that this was the real problem in Britain. Okay, the problem was the mines were nationalised, and once they were nationalised, they never changed. All right, but they were never modernised, and there was no reason why British mines couldn't have been modernised in the same way that mines in America and indeed even in South Africa were, with much more machinery and equipment, so that you didn't have blokes stripped to the waist using a pick to cut the coal, which was still happening in Britain in 1979, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, and that's poor governance.
Yeah,
that's, to my mind, that's not an argument against nationalisation. That's just poor governance. There's no reason why
nationalisation makes that more likely to stick, particularly
I think that's
when you have like a very powerful union like the National Union of Coal Miners and all this kind of stuff.
I don't agree with this. I think that this is a fallacious talking point that is sort of bandied about by libertarians. I don't think it's true. There's nothing. Just look at the cooperation that other governments have with other industries in other countries. I think Germany's a good example of this.
France is even better.
Well, I mean, France has some problems, but I'm saying that there's no reason why you can't work with unions and say, look, these mines need to be modernized. Some people will lose their jobs, but there needs to be the sort of infrastructure in place to then take those people and move them into different industries.
That would have been preferable to closing them all. Yes, I agree with you.
But this idea of just, leaving, not having any sort of strategic industrial policy whatsoever is just suicide. And you look at the US, that it's funny because COVID really has exposed, well, and there's a couple of things here. One, which is that a lot of people in the West are now realizing that, quote unquote, China is eating our lunch. Like people are suddenly realizing because of COVID, oh shit, and we don't produce any PPE. We've exported all of our industry to China. China's this rising power. Taiwan manufactures all of our semiconductors. People are realizing that this sort of dream of bringing China into the liberal world order has completely backfired. Mm-hmm. All of this sort of neoliberal economic policy and sort of ideology, a lot of people are realizing that this has actually been a fucking disaster. I mean, basically, the Americans have they've brought on the rise of China themselves.
Yeah.
And now they're sort of really in decline.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, mate.
And so now, I think it just lays bare the folly of just leaving everything to the free market.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Particularly because we don't actually have a free market, and no one's had a free market since at least World War II. At least, like there isn't a free market really. We live in a system which is it's a globalist system, obviously, but the idea that even the Yanks don't do in no way, shape, or form have an absolutely free market system, not even approaching. And Britain certainly doesn't, and nor do any European countries, and nor does Australia. It's a nonsense and it's a lie.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Obviously, free market is, when people use that term, they don't mean it in the strictest sense of the word. But if you're gonna argue and say that, oh, actually, we need freer markets, Duke, I think you'd be insane.
No, I'm not arguing that. That's something libertarians and Misesian economic people argue. I'm not arguing that. I don't think we've had that system for a very long time. What I think is that the sane thing for a nation like Britain to do, and indeed even the fucking idiot conservatives have done it to a very limited degree in terms of shipbuilding, is to turn around and say, look, there are some industries we have to protect, because unless we have them, we can't do stuff that makes us an independent nation. You know? And if you absolutely go along with the globalist system that we have today, everyone in the West is basically going to be totally dependent on people in the Far East of various descriptions.
Yeah, which is untenable.
Yeah, of course it is. Totally agree. Matt, what do you think about that, mate? I mean, you know.
I might have lost you there. Do you think, did you say the Tories defended shipbuilding, the industry?
Well, in theory they have, because of the British shipbuilding policy, which is mostly about warships, but also a little bit about the few merchant ships that we build anymore. But you have to remember that when you're looking at a British shipbuilding policy, Britain was a country that even in 1939 had like 75% of all the merchant ships in the world and the biggest navy in the world, even in 1939.
Well, I mean, that's what I was kind of like, because I thought they'd done next to nothing. I mean, yeah, I remember actually, this was quite a while ago. I remember reading a blog post by a guy who was like a big guy in shipbuilding as an industry, and he was basically extolling that basically complaining that he hadn't done enough to convince the government of sort of keeping shipbuilding as an industry.
Yep.
And it's basically almost entirely all gone abroad.
Yeah,
even like
South Koreans.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
The South Koreans. I mean, this is the funny thing when you talk to people about this and they go, "Oh yeah, but English people want too much money." It's like, well, South Korea is a pretty expensive place to live, and that's the new shipbuilding capital of the world. So,
but they can build ships, but partly because of unions, but mostly because of just the way things are these days. And don't forget, like, if you're going to build ships, you need a lot of people who know how to build ships, which
we
involves.
Had that.
Yeah, we used to have. Yeah, absolutely, we did, but we don't anymore. And like half the reason why the astute class SSNs, the nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines, have been so expensive is because Britain didn't build any for like 10 years. And half the people who used to work in that industry fucked off somewhere else.
Well, yeah,
if you can't make a living,
I mean, Hitchens makes the same point about railways. He says that, like, HS2 is going to take as long as it does because we just don't have the expertise anymore.
Yeah.
But that's also largely because of a lack of political will. If the government actually really genuinely cared about building this stuff up, they could do it in a heartbeat. But they don't.
They could, but in order to keep those skills, you have to have a steady drumbeat of business coming in, and that's what's happened with the railways, as you said there, Matt, and also even more so with the shipbuilding industry. If you're going to be able to build good and reasonably priced ships with loads of people who are skilled at doing that, you have to keep building ships all the time.
Yeah.
And like, for example, I've said this time and time again on my Discord. At the time of the Falklands War in 1982, the Royal Navy had 70 frigates and destroyers, roughly. A bit more than that, actually. And today we've got 17.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't
times
think
have changed.
Yeah.
That was that's sort of the peak of the Cold War. You're sort of winding down.
Wasn't really the peak of the Cold War at all. The Royal Navy, Richard, was much stronger 10 years before that, and even stronger than that 10 years before that. That was the Royal Navy winding down.
Yeah, no, sorry, you're right. So you got a situation where, you know, the UK's winding down its presence abroad because of the collapse in the empire, but then also, you know, we maintained quite a high level of defense spending while the Soviets were nominally a threat. And ever since the Soviet Union's disappeared, defense spending has, you know, dropped down to like 2% of GDP, and it kind of makes sense, really.
Not really, it doesn't, because you will find there are British regiments, like there's no British Army anymore. The British Army these days has basically been destroyed. But there's like an armored regiment in one of the Baltic states, and there's an APC infantry regiment also in one of the Baltic states. Both of whom would get killed in a week in a war if we were winning.
But I don't understand why we need a big army, navy, air force. I don't see the need.
All right. The navy bit is because Britain can only survive as a world trading power. We depend on it. We can't feed ourselves. We can nowhere near feed ourselves. Now, Matt might turn around and say, we could.
That's wrong.
Well, you might say that if we ploughed up every bit of arable land there was available in England. But basically, Britain hasn't been able to feed itself for 100 odd years. All right.
Wrong. No, this is all wrong. I can't sit here and listen to this.
But I would say that we probably could feed ourselves, but we'd have to eat potatoes and wheat. Yeah, there wouldn't be any. There'd be no avocado. There'd be no asparagus.
Wouldn't be a lot of beef.
There'd be a decent amount.
No, you'd be much more on the Boris Johnson idea of eat the bugs.
No, Duke, I take your point about the Navy. I think it makes sense for the Navy to be the biggest component of the armed forces.
Yes, it does.
But I don't see the point of having big air force, a big army. I don't really want any. I'm very much of the opinion of just having a military that just defends the country rather than has a power projection abroad. Yeah,
but you can't defend Britain in 2021. It's not possible. In fact, it hasn't been possible for a long time. I mean, look what happened in World War II, for fuck's sake, when Britain still had the biggest Royal Navy and the biggest navy in the world. Britain was very rapidly sent back to the British Isles. And the Germans had no chance whatsoever of invading Britain in 1940. Even if the RAF had lost the Battle of Britain, the RAF could have just redeployed to the north of England, and none of the German fighters had the range to get there. So there was no chance whatever of the tiny German navy of World War II being able to allow the Germans to invade Britain in World War II. It was all nonsense, and it was all propaganda from Churchill and the government, which was as much a socialist government as a conservative government because it was a national government. But leaving that aside, the only thing that made Britain important in World War II was the Royal Navy, which, basically destroyed the Italians in the Mediterranean and eventually allowed the British Army to win, destroyed the German Navy, so that by 1943 there was none of it left, basically, and eventually operated off Japan with 4 aircraft carriers, which had the war gone on 6 months longer, would have been 10 aircraft carriers. So you know, it was the Royal Navy that was made Britain of any importance whatsoever in World War II.
So I really can't comment. I just don't know enough about this. Sorry.
Yeah, it's history. So I mean, you know, but I mean, even today, Britain basically, whether you want to agree or disagree that Britain can feed itself, and I will strongly argue it can't, in any real form, especially with 65 million people, and actually it's more likely 67 million because we've probably got 2 million illegal immigrants in Britain at least. But anyway, even without all that, Britain is totally dependent on overseas trade, coming and going, and 95% plus of trade goes by sea. That's why you need a navy if you're an island nation like Britain is.
Right, but you're just talking about putting the cart before the horse. I mean, you're saying we need to build up the navy for the trade that we don't have, in the hope that we can get the trade that we don't have.
But we
to require the navy that we want.
No. We do still have the trade, even if it's imports, Matt. You've still got to get those imports if you need them.
Yeah, I used to work on farms, and that's why I know you're wrong. But I'm now working in like customs and importing, not for HMRC, but separately. And I mean, they make it significantly harder to get anything out of the country than they do to get anything in. So
No, I don't disagree with any of that. But we're still an island nation, and we still depend on trade going in and coming out. I mean, like, obviously some of it's vital stuff like food, and other stuff is not so vital, but it's still stuff we fucking all need. And the Navy is the only thing that can protect that.
Yeah, but they should have done more for shipbuilding generally, which is how we got into this whole conversation.
Listen, I'm not going to argue with that one on you. Like I said, in 1939, even in 1939, something like 70% of the world's merchant ships were British.
But how would you get the expertise back, or keep the expertise when you've generated it?
Build ships. Build ships. You just got to build ships. Look, there was a parliamentary select committee very recently, and you can even find some of its stuff on YouTube, where the Royal Navy has been saying for donkey's years now, look, the Royal Navy is too small. And even this parliamentary select committee turned around and said the Royal Navy, which at the moment has 17 major surface escorts, i.e. destroyers and frigates, needs twice that number. Even the parliamentary select committee said that. And what's actually happened is since last year, the Royal Navy has gone down from 19 to 17, and at current rates, it will only go back up to 19 in 2026. And even the ships we have, many of them are only half armed because they're fitted for, but not with a lot of weapons.
Okay, but like one of the issues is Theresa May wanted to bring this idea that people that do more technical skills like engineering in university, that their tuition fee upper limit would be higher because it requires more resources by the university to do, which kind of sounds like it's discouraging engineering or anything along those lines. But similarly,
the opposite of what you really want. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not even sure if I really want universities full stop. But the thing is, even if you didn't do that, like you go and look at the starting wage of, let's say, someone with an engineering degree versus someone that goes and works in, diversity, equality, inclusion and equality,
shitting on jobs, in other words.
Yeah, or well, basically anything like that. I mean, it kind of seems like a no-brainer that people naturally don't go towards engineering, and instead go towards this other stuff.
And also,
guys actually go towards engineering.
Yeah, and also women are more likely to go into those crappy non-jobs.
Well,
And
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's
women
also
are
why.
increasingly like the majority of the university graduates in the UK now.
Well, I mean, that's of course the other issue. If you talk about like let's say falling birth rates, which isn't a conversation we should probably get into, but
We
they'll
should,
say, well,
actually.
it's because of the pill and job choices, and women can go and have these fulfilling careers, and yet they're all still actually being outperformed by sort of everyone else.
And they all get to about 37 and suddenly decide that they need to find a husband and have a child. And then they complain there's no good men left because they've been riding the cock carousel for the last 25 years. And all of a sudden they can't find a decent bloke,
Well, I don't know how many women that actually is, but it does happen.
Fair number, mate. It's a fair number. Richard, what do you think about that stuff, mate?
Well, you just covered a whole wide range of things there. Look, how are you going to get people into engineering if there's no engineering industry to go into?
Quite right. Totally agree.
Do we honestly think that private businesses are just going to, invest gargantuan sums of money and bring capital to market for these phantom industries that don't exist, particularly when you're up against other state-backed industries? It's just never going to happen. So there has to be a broad industrial policy from the government, and there has to be government support for those industries.
Richard, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I won't again, but I will just say that was the whole point of the British shipbuilding strategy.
But it does next to nothing.
No, it doesn't do enough. Don't get me wrong.
Wait, it doesn't do anything. I mean, it builds ships for the Royal Navy. It doesn't.
No,
encourage...
it does build also some merchant ships, but not enough. So it does do something, but it doesn't do anywhere near enough, is what I'm trying to say, Matt. I mean, the idea is there, but the government were not impressed enough to give enough money to it. They'd far rather spend, I don't know, $100 billion shutting down the country because of a virus that ain't very dangerous, That's the only point I would make. I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just trying to point out the whole point of the British shipbuilding strategy from the people who originally formed it was exactly what Matt was just saying. It was that you have to build ships. That's the way you get people going into engineering and building ships, is to build ships all the time. And then all of a sudden it becomes an attractive career. I can go there and I can build ships. And then my son can follow me and build ships, And not just for top engineers, but also skilled tradesmen and all the rest of it. That's what used to happen in the days when most of the world's merchant ships were British. They were British because the shipbuilding industry in Britain was the best in the world.
Right, but as Richard said, you need at this point you kind of need a top-down policy to get this stuff going, because companies are actually willing to lose money now and that's for a whole plethora of reasons, but they're almost willing to throw money away on sort of vanity projects centered around sort of so-called social justice and other crap like that.
But they're not companies that make steel and build ships.
Well, they make something, obviously.
Well, yeah, all right. They might make razor blades or something like that. But the actual thing that made Britain great, which was heavy industry and all this kind of shit, those guys are not generally very positive.
Well, no, because those are blue collar industries.
Yeah. But even the white collar guys who work in those industries are generally not very positive. But you are quite right, and I think Richard was kind of saying the same thing, that the only way this will work is these days in Britain is if the government supports them. And the Conservative Party, in inverted commas, doesn't, basically.
It's literally It's always been that way. I think this free market idea is a complete myth. Like the British Empire, which really drove the need for a huge merchant marine and navy, you can't argue that that was not basically government policy. Like these huge capital industries don't just spring up out of nowhere, like my free market. It's just nonsense. There's always been an element of government involvement in these industries because it fits a national strategic goal.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that there's no such thing as a real private company nowadays, but
yeah, I'd agree with Matt on that one.
And there possibly never was, but still.
I don't think there ever really has been.
No, there I might disagree with you. I think maybe in the 19th century there was. I mean, like 19th century British shipyards could literally build a ship twice as fast as the Americans or the Germans.
Yeah, but Duke, why was that? Because we were the leading power in the world and our supremacy was based on naval power. That's government policy. The whole reason that industry existed was because of the government.
I wouldn't totally agree with that. And I would also say it is because we had the most skilled engineers and tradesmen.
Yes, but Duke, why did we have the most skilled engineers? Because that was government
because we're
policy.
an island nation and we depend on that stuff.
It just sort of sprang up out of nowhere magically. Just the invisible hand of the market came in, and we just happened to be this massive industrial builder of ships. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I mean, it's the legacy of Henry VIII. It's literally, it's literally from the top.
Yeah.
Well, all right. There was a certain legacy from Henry VIII, although much more from Queen Elizabeth I. In terms of like Royal Navy ships and all that stuff. Sure, I'll agree with that. And like even in the Nelson era or a bit before that, like 50 years before Nelson in the middle of the 18th century, the Royal Navy and the Royal Dockyards and all that stuff was probably the biggest industrial enterprise in the world. So to that degree, Richard's entirely right. But
you have to remember that the Royal Navy probably bootstrapped the entire British shipbuilding industry with that sort of seed capital. That's what created a market for these companies to exist in the first place.
Yeah,
so
but hang on. No, but hang on. The Royal Dockyards didn't build merchant ships, whereas the merchant dockyards did sometimes, in fact, very often, build Royal Navy ships.
Yeah, you missed my point. I'm saying that the fact that the Royal Navy was as big as it was actually that's what generated the ecosystem for these private firms to exist in the first place.
Maybe. All right. I'm not going to argue about that. You may be right, but I would point out that the Royal Dockyards, whilst they always built Royal Navy ships right up until the early 1900s, and the idiot liberals who came in 1908, the private shipyards didn't build. They basically built. None of the Royal Dockyards built merchant ships at all. The only people who built merchant ships were private dockyards. Although the private dockyards also built Royal Navy ships, but then they got orders for them. And my point is that if you're going to maintain a British shipbuilding industry, you need constant orders, which they don't get from the British government, because the British government will not maintain a decent sized Royal Navy.
Well, I think the British government has a policy of like they won't necessarily favor domestic industry. They've got this sort of neoliberal economic point of view. Oh, well, we've run the numbers and we can get this ship cheaper from South Korea than we can domestically. So, wow, this Mises book says that that's the best outcome for everybody. So, free markets win.
Yeah, no, I'm not a free market supporter, mate. You're not going to get an argument from me on that one.
Well, I mean, I think Mises is a bit more base than that. I think he's one of the better ones. But I mean, it's worth pointing out, of course, that the Prime Minister was driving around in a BMW until only quite recently.
Well done, Alexander Johnson.
I'm not sure if it was him, but it was like all of them were being driven around in BMWs. I'm not sure what the current one is. We'll have a look.
But it's not British.
I mean, fundamentally, this country doesn't really invest in anything. I mean, you can even look at the NHS, which really just asset strips poor countries.
Yep.
So rather than going to the effort of training our own doctors, and I make the point that for every successful applicant at a medical school in the UK, there are something like 100 applicants. So what's actually happening there is that there's not enough capacity available to teach all of the people to be doctors. And of course, this just forces the NHS to go and find talent abroad. So this lovely, very caring institution is actually quite a bloodsucker, and
it's much more than a bloodsucker than that.
Stripping developing countries of their talent. I mean, it's quite an evil institution, really, in that respect.
It's also enormously expensive and enormously inefficient.
That's actually not true.
Yeah, go on.
I think it may have been from the OECD, but essentially some of their studies
I'd believe their stuff all the time.
Okay. But some of their studies have shown that for the output that you get for the money that's spent, it is actually quite an efficient service. And that's basically because it's a monopoly service that doesn't pay doctors and nurses what they can get elsewhere. And it's able to basically, like I say, asset strip talent from abroad. So in that respect, you do get quite good value for money for what you do spend on it.
All right.
But that's not to say that... Sorry, go on.
To me, it's a money sink. There is no amount of money that you can spend on the NHS that would make the NHS as good as people would like it to be. It's impossible.
But that's a universal issue, that there is an unlimited demand for healthcare.
Yeah.
And
the other thing I would say on it, which is a bit more personal, is my late Australian woman was a nurse with a master's degree, and she told me. And Australia, by the way, has a very similar system to the NHS. It's a little bit more efficient, called Medicare, but it's a bit more efficient. Because it has less managers. And she said to me that like 2/3 of the people, like nurses and doctors who they got from overseas, had to have retraining when they got to Australia because they weren't up to standard.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a problem we have in the UK. What's the stat? 26% of doctors are foreign born, and they are sort of guilty of 80% of malpractice. But I mean, I'm not sure I agree with the efficiency thing. I mean, I actually do know that your point about for the money we spend in on doctors and that it is actually true. But there was also another study that was a comparison of OECD countries, but I don't know if it was done by them, and they rated the NHS as the best. Out of, I think it was 9 or 11. But yeah, all right, fake laughing, but no one cares.
I'm not fake laughing.
And the thing is that that they found that that it was the best, but only when they looked at ease of use. When it came to actually keeping patients alive, it was the bottom of the 11.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's awful in terms of cancer survival rates. It's really bad.
Yeah.
But it's a lot worse now than it was 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, I think it's almost half of all appointments for cancer patients have been cancelled or pushed back at some point.
Heart disease, like anything you care to name, other than China virus, basically.
I mean, I used to be quite. I mean, I'm still very sort of. I'm still fine with the idea of like a free at point of use single payer system, but I don't know. I used to be quite moderate on the NHS. Now I abjectly hate it. I feel like actual physical disgust when I drive past an NHS mural that someone made on my way to work.
Go out there and clap like a performing skill.
Oh yeah, but that's down to the sort of the crazy politics that revolves around that institution. But I think in principle, the principle and idea of the NHS and healthcare free at the point of use as a principle I can get behind. But the way that it's devolved into this sacred cow, this secular house of worship is really quite disturbing.
I'd love to know what proportion of money in the NHS goes to doctors and nurses, and what proportion goes to managers. I would be very surprised if it's hugely more to doctors and nurses than managers.
Well, when I was working in a job a few years ago, because the job was quite close to sort of one of the bigger hospitals in the southeast of England. And we had an issue where we were doing deliveries to a small village shop, and a manager for the local hospital lived next door in this enormous Tudor house with gates and a high-rise wall all the way around. And he kept
the Lord of the Manor.
Yeah, and he kept phoning in and raging every day that our delivery driver was making too much noise with his little cart up this little cobblestone alleyway to the back of the shop, and it was keeping him and his wife awake.
Yeah,
I can't really see how, because his house was literally like 120 feet from the from the wall. I don't
Man, I don't know. I think that's an issue. Richard, what's your next subject?
I don't know really.
Oh, actually,
I'm afraid I didn't really come with any pre-prepared talking points. I just thought we'd sort of just roll with it.
No problem. But we haven't spoken we haven't spoken in public for quite a long while. So, what would you like to bring up next? Because I think you have a lot of good takes on things. I don't always agree with you, but I think they're always reasonable takes.
Well, like arseholes, everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah,
and that's all I have. I only have opinions, and that's it really. I don't think I've really got anything particularly important or insightful to say about anything. I'm just merely an observer of things.
As are we all. I mean, none of us have got any actual power.
I think in terms of sort of actually just returning back to what Ataman was saying about the right being in stasis, because you were really talking about this sort of online community. Mm-hmm. And, I think my observations is that, it's largely a talking shop, and actually nothing actionable comes out of these discussions. No theories are generated that actually have any sort of explanatory or predictive powers. It comes out with no.
Richard's getting cut off here by the powers that be. Richard, you might want to reconnect. You might want to reconnect there, mate. I think that's what he's going to do. I don't know. I kind of agree with what he's saying largely. But I think there is some real life stuff that comes out of it. I mean, there are little local groups that start this kind of stuff. How you going, Richard?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
I could see. I wasn't talking, but I could see the outline of the avatar moving as if there was noise.
Yeah, there was a lot of static and background noise.
Yeah.
Oh, it might be because I'm wearing a lavalier, which is against my fleece, so that might be it. So sorry about that.
I thought you were in the sunny Mediterranean, mate.
Right, I am. What do you mean?
I'm just thinking of all this like heavy clothing you're wearing.
Oh no, it's just a lightweight fleece.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, no, look, I think you're right. But I do think there are some local small scale stuff that does come from this sort of discussion.
That does what?
There is some real life small scale stuff that does come from this kind of discussion.
And it's achieving what?
Well, look, if you're going to ask us what anything is achieving, then we might just as well all go and be German women in 1945 Germany and kill ourselves before all the Russians come and rape us.
Well, Evelyn seems to advocate that, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know Richard agrees with that because he told me that.
But the thing is, I mean, even the part of the sort. I mean, if you want to just talk about the online right, if the part of the online right that actually tries to be intellectual, it's still just rediscussing ideas put down by people like Curtis Yarvin and things like that.
It's just all theory that doesn't have any practical applications whatsoever.
How would you change that, Richard?
Well, therein lies the conundrum. I don't have an answer to that. But what I certainly do know is that a bunch of anonymous people talking to each other on the internet about theory is not going to move us any further forward.
All right. Do you think if all of us were not anonymous, but we were still talking about theory, that would make any difference?
No.
Cool. I agree. Hang on. I don't know what's going on here, mate, but it sounds like you're having an avalanche.
Yeah, I think. I'll tell you what. Let me just move to my MacBook microphone.
No worries, man. But yeah, I look. Richard just said he agreed with me that even if we weren't anonymous, we still wouldn't be getting anywhere. So I just think the right at the moment doesn't have the real right, not the inverted commas so-called Conservative Party, or in America the Republicans, or in Australia the Liberals. None of those parties, none of the real right, who are all to the right of those political parties, has any power whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a funny one. Like Ralph had this sort of grand idea for starting a party a little while ago, didn't he? Starting some sort of political movement. And I don't particularly like or trust him at all. But I do think the groundwork that he laid out for how such a thing could work is quite interesting. I mean, he was basically talking about like bringing people in on one issue and then moving them as time goes by.
Sure.
I mean, I think the one issue to bring people in on, depending on where you live, is housing. Because I mean, the housing system situation in England, which has been bad for years, it is beyond fucked now. It's really, really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. If I was going to look at one issue now, I'd probably say forced vaccine passports and forced vaccines and that stuff. But yeah, I don't disagree with you.
That's a very divisive subject. That's a very polarized subject because there are people who are adamantly against that and then adamantly for it. I'm not sure that's the route I would go. You need something with broad support that attracts interest from all sections of society, not a divisive issue like that, I would have thought. I don't know. I've not really given it much thought, actually.
All right. Would you say housing was that?
I think you need a holistic approach. You need my thing is that I look at the options that people have to vote for. And there's really, I mean, I can't point to a single party that really represents my strain of thought.
100%.
I suppose the only party that I sort of look at and think this doesn't seem too bad is really the SDP, which is a kind of, I suppose it's like a kind of blue Labour-y kind of party. They seem sensible. I think they have relatively sensible views on immigration. They're quite sort of socially conservative. So in that respect, they seem like out of the options that are available, the only guys that seem realistic to me.
You don't like the Heritage Party?
It's too fringe.
Yeah.
It's got fringe vibes that will only ever activate very small minorities. It's too far out there.
Yeah, I kind of think that that David Curtin's gotten a bit hung up on lockdown stuff. I think that's a hard, the whole sort of lockdown stuff is a hard thing to push against if you're living in the UK, because it really doesn't feel like there was ever a lockdown. It's so minimal. I mean, maybe if you're in Australia, you could get a really big movement off the ground on that stuff, but
100,000 protesters every weekend in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah,
in Australia.
You won't get that in the UK.
Well, there was a pretty big protest in London a week ago, I think.
Yeah, and that's people that have been willing to travel there because London's like hostile territory, but you're still only talking maybe a few hundred people.
No, hang on. I don't know if you watched any of the videos from that, Matt, but there were thousands of people at that demo.
Those crowds always look a lot bigger than they actually are.
No. I looked at it very carefully on at least 5 or 6 videos. There were thousands of people there, not a few hundred. I know that's what the Bias Brainwashing Corporation said, but they say that all the time. And the ABC does that in Australia. Well, and the ABC in Australia, which is the same thing, the Australian Bias Brainwashing Corporation, says exactly the same thing every weekend too. But look, I watched Based Welshman's video. I watched the Falklands War veteran dude who was a Brexiteer. I watched his video.
The Omicron guy.
Yeah. The guy with the big head, as everyone always says. I watched several videos on that, and there were actually a fair few thousand people at that demo.
I'll be surprised if there's more than 1,000.
No. There was minimum 5,000 at that demo.
No way.
Mate, listen, I watched a few streams, and I'm quite good at counting people because it was one of the skills I learned in the military. But there were probably about 5,000 at least at that video, at that demo.
All right.
But yeah, I don't know. But you're right, and as you just really made plain, many people in the UK won't believe that. But I mean, it's the same as like UK for a year and a half turned around and said, "Oh, there's only 5 million people in the UK not vaccinated," and then the World Health Organization pointed out actually it's more like 20 million. And actually, I think the World Health Organization slipped up, because the British government and the Bias Brainwashing Corporation and the rest of the MSM had been trying to pretend that nearly all British people had been vaccinated, when I don't think anything like all of them had been.
It's quite a few.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. No, it's a lot, but out of like there's, all right, in theory there's 65 million people in the UK, although actually it's probably nearer 68 million. In terms of illegal immigrants,
I think even the official statistic is almost 68 million.
Yeah. But it's whatever the official number is, it's 2.5 million more than that. But they've been saying for over a year now that only 5 million Brits are not vaccinated. I just don't believe that. I think it's crap. And
why would you think that?
Because the World Health Organization slipped up recently and made a very public video, which they quickly retracted, saying that over 20 million Brits weren't vaccinated. Now, that to me is much more realistic because it's much more along the lines of what's happened in Australia.
But why? Maybe they. How would the World Health Organization have better statistics than the UK government?
Because the World Health Organization runs the UK government in part.
Right. Okay.
You don't think they do?
No.
Oh, all right. Then me and you are going to have to really strongly agree to disagree on that one.
Fair enough. But rather than seeing a conspiratorial element to this, I'm much more inclined to think actually maybe they just fucked up with that video, because obviously the way that you count.
Yeah,
what is
releasing it?
No, but what is the definition of somebody who is vaccinated? Is it someone who's had one shot? Is it someone who's had 2 shots? Is it someone who's had 3 shots?
One. It's someone who's had 1.
Right. So maybe the world. I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. The point I'm getting at is that I hesitate to jump to conspiratorial.
Oh, me too, mate. Honestly, I believe everything I'm told by governments.
So why would the UK government lie about the number of people that have been vaccinated?
Because if you pretend only 5 million people have not been vaccinated, loads of more sheeples will get vaccinated.
Oh, come on, that's cringe.
Oh, for God's
Calling people
sake.
sheeple is like peak 2010.
All right, okay.
I work with 25 people and only 2 of us haven't been vaccinated.
Well, I'm one who hasn't been and I never will be, but yes, I do call them sheeple, and I can because I've not been vaccinated, all right? Nothing. The only way I'll get vaccinated is if about 7 guys with white coats hold me down.
Okay, so if we poll our chat, is that the realistic definition of...
There is no chat, but yeah. All right.
Thank fuck there's no chat.
Yeah. No, honestly, I just don't understand how you guys are turning around to say to me that when the British government says only 5 million British people haven't been vaccinated, you believe them. Because why
wouldn't I believe them?
Well, if I wanted everyone to get vaccinated, I'd say as few people as possible had not been vaccinated.
When I saw that stat and it was like 89%, I didn't go, oh, I believe that. I thought to myself, well, hang on, how many people do I know who haven't got it? And funny enough, the pattern actually seems to hold true. So yeah. I'm inclined to say in this instance,
how many people do you know? All right, Matt, how many people do you know who died from China virus? Actually, no, not like know someone who knew someone.
Then no one, but what does that matter?
Because I'm the same, you see.
Okay.
Richard, how many people do you actually know who died from China virus?
I don't know. I have not known anybody personally who has died of coronavirus.
Okay, so that's 3 of us, and we all live in 3 different countries, and not one of us knows anyone who's personally died from it.
And
how does this relate to vaccination rates? How?
Because if you want people to get vaccinated, you tell everyone else everyone's been vaccinated. This
is nonsense logic. I don't quite understand how you've come to this ridiculous conclusion.
All right.
Do you know how you get people vaccinated? You tell them that there's a deadly virus that's killing many people.
Yeah, which is a lie, but yeah.
Well, whatever.
Well, I mean, it's a lie. If it's a lie, if you're not in your mid-80s, hugely overweight, or otherwise very sick already.
Why are we relitigating this talking point? Like, I think everybody that listens to your stream knows what your position is.
Absolutely right. But the point I'm trying to make to you, and I'm not getting through here, obviously, is that if you want everybody to do something, you say everyone's doing it. Most dimwits, which is like the vast majority of the general public, will do that. If you tell everyone, everyone's doing it.
So what evidence have you got that it's wrong, though? I mean, this is the thing. Like, I'm literally saying that that as far as I can see, the statistic seems to hold true from what I can see with my own eyes. And you're saying it's not because it's not. That's kind of it.
All right. I guys, if I can't convince you of the most obvious, like,
If it's
propaganda
obvious, then
bollocks,
prove it. Then it should be easy for you to point to some examples, anecdotal or otherwise.
if I can't convince you guys that if you want most people to do something, you tell people that most people do it. I just don't understand how more obvious I can make something, to be honest.
Sure, that's like how Netflix's whole business model works, but ultimately it's not going to hold true every time, and I don't think it holds true here. I mean, we were just talking earlier about NHS idolatry, and now you're saying that actually everyone's secretly anti-vax.
No, I never said anything like anyone was. I said 20%.
But that's your implication.
No,
that's what you're implying.
No,
you're implying that the government's lying to get people to get vaccinated because they aren't vaccinated. And why would they not be vaccinated?
Because about 20% of British people are not.
I don't believe that.
That's my point. I think that's reasonable that 20% are not actually.
That's 1 in 5.
That means
nothing like what I've seen.
Okay, that means 80% of people are.
Yeah, 4 in 5.
Yeah.
It's
so you're
talking.
Well, okay, if you say so. I don't believe that's true, but all right.
I literally don't know, but my anecdotal experience, having spoken to people back home, I can't point to anybody in my family who is not vaccinated. That's just my anecdotal experience.
So you don't know anyone in your whole family is not vaccinated?
To my knowledge, no.
Matt, anyone in your whole family is not vaccinated?
No.
Wow. And there's me with my family and no one is. Not even my son, who came under huge pressure from the Royal Navy to get vaccinated, didn't get vaccinated.
Well, my family's quite small, admittedly, but as I said,
yeah, my
in my workplace,
small.
In my workplace, 25 people. There's only me and one other person who's not got it.
Wow, that's weird. I mean, look, I
don't think it is.
I don't think it is weird. I think your point of view, Duke, is the odd one out.
Why?
Because it just is.
Explain why. I don't understand why you think my position is weird.
Because most normal people who don't have any interest in politics whatsoever largely
will just do as the government tells them.
Yes, they will. Particularly when it's a global phenomena being reinforced, a talking point that's reinforced globally across all governmental and supranational organizations. Of course, most people are going to get vaccinated.
Because they're dimwits.
I don't quite see how you can say that. They're just normal people doing what they think is best conscientious people doing what they think is best.
Do either of you guys know the Franklin, who is a YouTuber?
I'm aware of him, yeah.
Do you know him, Matt?
Yeah, I've seen you stream with him before.
All right. Now, his wife, who is a fit, young, 34-year-old woman, he had to rush her to the hospital after her vax, which she only took because she wanted to go and see her dying parents. One of her dying parents. All right? And she's still sick, and this is 4 months after she had it. And I'm not even going to talk about, like as AA does, all the footballers collapsing dead on football pitches because,
Well, I'm skeptical of these football. I don't trust footballers whatsoever.
No, nor do I.
The fact that this appears to be happening with footballers who are not to be trusted because they're liars who fake injuries to hold games up.
Do you think they're fake when they die?
Well, not when they die, obviously.
Okay,
but
cool.
What I'm saying is that we don't appear to be seeing this same phenomena happening in other high intensity sports. So cycling,
we see it in
marathon running.
No, you're wrong there, Richard. We see it in cricket. We see it in ice hockey. We see it in baseball. We see it in American football. We see it in rugby. We see it in many forms of athletics, all over the place. And so much so that you are now getting these people turning around and saying, oh no, they're actually dying either from something to do with climate change, if you're a complete dimbo. But if you're not a complete dimbo, oh no, they were going to die anyway. It's the China virus. Young, fit people dying of heart attacks and serious heart problems, and many others having continual serious heart problems. Are you guys serious? I'm not you, by the way, Matt. But Richard, are you seriously telling me that you don't think this is an issue at all? You just think it's made up?
I wouldn't go as far to say that it's made up. I say that from what I understand so far, that the data doesn't bear this out. It's kind of anecdotal.
What data have you seen?
No, but that's what I'm saying. There's not. If it is happening, then it will manifest itself in the data.
But it won't, because we're not getting honest data. I mean, like, listen, Oh, come on, Richard. You know as well as I do, I hope, that there was a bloke in New Zealand who was killed in a gangland killing, shot several times, stone dead, but they found that he had China virus in the autopsy and said he was a China virus death. They just did. And as well as I do, in the UK...
What's that got to do with collapsing footballers, though?
Hang on. In the UK, they even turn around and say to you, all the time, you don't die from China virus, you die with it. So they can ignore anything else that caused you to die, apart from the fact you had China virus. Now, you know that, and you are a very intelligent man, as I damn well know, and you are telling me you believe that shit.
No, you've just introduced something completely different. I mean, sure. If I actually don't know that, because I don't know that for certain. But if somebody dies with COVID, then they attribute that as a COVID death. I don't know. I have no idea.
No, you don't, because the government makes sure you can't. I have tried to find these figures, and you cannot find them. The only figures you can find is died with. Not died from, died with. And like I said,
that's also just because it's really hard to say what someone's actually died specifically from.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they don't care. And they don't care.
Even for all this talk about like how many people alcohol kills, you'll never actually find someone where it says like alcoholism on their death certificate. It's always
Matt,
just
I totally agree.
Factors.
Yep, I totally agree. I'm not arguing with you at all. But the point is that the China virus basically kills people in their 80s, or people who are hugely overweight, or otherwise already at death's door. Hardly anyone dies from the China virus who wouldn't have been dead within a year anyway.
I don't think you'll find anyone on this panel that disagrees with that.
Right. Thank you. That's my main point I've been trying to get across for the last, I don't know.
No, well, hang on a minute though, because
no, it's not.
Wouldn't that actually feed into the reason why more people would get the vaccine?
No, because the vaccine doesn't damn well work. It doesn't stop you catching it. It doesn't stop you spreading it. And if you are under about 80, it's much more likely to give you heart problems.
I don't think it's quite 80, but yeah, there is a point where it ends up being more counterproductive. But
and what are governments all around the world doing? They're trying to get kids down to about 5 vaccinated.
Sure,
face no threat whatsoever.
Sure, but you're saying that they're attributing all these extra deaths to COVID, and then you're wondering why people are willing to go along and get vaccinated.
Well, look at the damn. All you've got to do is look at the news. Actually, sorry. All you've got to do is look at not the mainstream news, and you can see most of the stuff they're talking about is shit.
I think all those news sources, alternative, mainstream, whatever, are largely bollocks anyway.
Yeah, but the alternative ones are better than the MSM, which are mostly just propaganda for the government.
Sure, but I mean, even those alternative ones are propaganda for something.
I don't know. I think most of the alternative ones are. I don't think they're propaganda for anything. I think they're just against the government narrative, which is the world narrative, which is the New World Order, Great Reset narrative, blah, blah, blah.
But this is why, I mean, why this COVID stuff really pisses me off, because whenever it comes up, like, all of the right just turns into this, like, just this really autistic, just whole of just circular talking points.
I don't know. Maybe we should let it go, and we'll just pass peacefully into dystopian future.
I'm not saying let it go, but I'm saying do something about it, and you know.
Well, look, what can you do about it beyond what I do, which is like I'm not vaccinated. I never wear a bloody mask. And when some idiot in a supermarket says to me, "Oh, you got to sign in, mate," I just tell them to fuck off. I don't know what else you can do.
Well, I mean, this. I suppose that's like the $1 million question, isn't it? What can you do about any of this stuff? I mean, you were saying earlier about protesting, and you were saying about protesting size, but the problem with that is it actually doesn't matter. Like
not if the MSM doesn't report it, it's like one hand clapping in the forest.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, China has thousands of protests every year, and they just let them go out there and do their little march and hold up their little signs, and they don't let the press cover it, and that's the end of it. And
unless they're big enough, in which case tanks roll over.
Well, I mean, that's a funny one, isn't it? Because Tiananmen Square was the last in a series of protests. And we only remember it for that one moment, but actually the series of protests up until that point were anti-immigration protests.
Yep.
And yet it's never remembered as that, ever. It's been, I mean, even then, like, I don't know if Tiananmen Square is actually a particularly big topic within China, but outside of China, it's been just warped into a pro-globo homo message when it was actually originally the opposite. So, you know, that is an instance of, even when sort of you kind of win the optics game, they just reshape it to make it into whatever they want it to be anyway.
Of course, yeah, of course they do. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Yeah. Oh, look, I get fucked with the China virus thing because I think it's a really big deal. And
well, it certainly is for you in Australia, but for me, it's actually not much of a problem. It's very much location dependent.
Yeah, in your little place, it isn't, Richard, but it's going to be bigger in Britain than it was, for sure. And
that's factually not correct, though, is it? Because
no, hang on. Look, we had, even like last week, sage people turning around and saying, "Oh, we didn't model this new, very mild form of the virus because that wouldn't have made the government do anything. So we only modeled the very worst case possible scenarios. In fact, exactly what the global warming wanks always do. They always model the very worst possible scenario. And like, you can model anything, like shit in, shit out. Richard, you're a computer guy. You know that. Shit in, shit out.
Yeah, but the point is that these lockdowns have not manifested themselves this time round, right?
Not yet.
So the response to Omicron in the UK is less restrictive than what happened last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're only in December.
I mean, my kind of, if I want to get conspiratorial, I kind of feel that because, I mean, the thing is, because of these sort of recent scandals, I think polls have shown that like over half the country wanted Boris Johnson to resign. So he kind of can't really bring in restrictions on his own. So instead, you're seeing restrictions going up against like the English in like Scotland and Wales, and like France has put Britain on a blacklist. And I kind of feel that it's that he's kind of manoeuvring into this position where he can then just turn around and go, well, you know, my hands are tied. It's not me that's putting you into lockdown. But
totally.
Even then, even when there was lockdowns, it really wasn't that perceptible to most sort of British people. I mean, you hardly ever see a police car or a police officer anywhere anyway.
Right,
so it's not as if
How
you're going to get pulled over for being too
this?
far from home. Yeah.
But they did put dye into that lake in the Lake District so that no one would go and look at it, didn't they?
Yeah, like one place, one time. But
yeah.
And they flew drones over, I think it was the Lake District, and like filmed dog walkers.
Yeah.
But you know, that's I mean, what percentage of the population goes to the Lake District?
Probably a fair number in that area, but I don't know. I think you guys are still living in a pretty false hope situation.
Sure, but it's not. It's about perception. Like you can't. I mean, the problem is, even in the Soviet Union, there were people that probably claimed it wasn't what it was. So, trying to get people here in the UK where they can get Amazon to deliver everything to their door that they need, and they get paid by the government to sit on the settee, trying to convince people that it's dystopian, that it's a bad situation, is very difficult.
Mm. Oh, listen, I think it'll happen. Listen, this is something I wanted to ask you guys. Did you guys hear the British minister last week turn around and say that having a personal car was a 20th century delusion that should no longer be carried on?
Who said that? A Tory?
Yeah, absolutely. A Conservative minister said last week that the idea that people should have their own personal car was a 20th century idea that we now need to ditch.
That doesn't surprise me. That's
very
much in keeping with the what's in vogue at the minute, with sort of the Great Reset agenda and decarbonisation and all of this stuff. That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it didn't surprise me, but there it was from an inverted commas air quotes conservative.
Why call them conservative? Just call them Tory, because that's a much more apt name for them.
Because they're not even Tories. They're liberal left wingers. Is the most accurate description. They're liberal left wingers. I mean, honestly, they're left of centre liberals. That's what most.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you're telling us this, because I think we literally all agree.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's why I call them, in inverted commas, conservative, because they're actually left of centre liberals. Did you hear about that one, Matt?
Yeah, I did. But I mean, who cares at this point? I mean, they're going to gaslight you one way or the other. So it's just kind of par for the course. Unless you can do something about it, there's not really much point fretting over it. The funny thing is, in a way, I actually kind of agree with him. I don't like cars either. And in my sort of Cromwellian utopia, I would probably ban them too.
Jesus, I just wanted an extra. I always just wanted an extra S with a sunroof, but there we go. A Jaguar.
I do wonder what the standard of living in England is going to be like in 50 years' time, because, and I post about this on Twitter every now and then, but in my mind, one of the things I don't like about England is that actually the material conditions are really quite low relative to other countries.
Yes,
our houses are small. The infrastructure is very bad. It's I don't think you get a very good standard of living in the UK. And
very overcrowded.
Very, very overcrowded. And I look at the trajectory of the next 25 years and think, okay, decarbonisation, less luxury items like steaks and meats, less resource consumption. It's really going to be quite, from a economic material perspective going to be quite crap to live there.
Dystopian almost.
In a way, isn't that going to be like the only saving grace as well?
What, they'll be dystopian?
Yeah, because then the foreigners will piss off.
I'm not sure they will. See, I think
I don't think that's the case, because
nor do I. I think shit England will still be better than shit Pakistan.
Yeah, that's the problem. So, and also I think English people have this. English people will accept shit and be thankful for it. I mean, I just remember listening to one of your streams a couple of weeks ago, Duke. And was it Johnny P said, well, 100 years ago, your ancestors had 10 kids in a 2 up, 2 down terrace. And I thought, are we meant to be sort of, is that something to aim for? To live in this kind of cramped, shitty conditions?
Well, I guess I kind of got the point he was... Go on.
I was just going to say a 2 up, 2 terrace 100 years ago would probably have had a much bigger front and back garden than an English house today. But yeah, all right.
I mean, I disagreed with them on that. I kind of get like the overarching point, which is that if people don't want kids, it's you know, if people actually wanted kids, the economic issues wouldn't really get in their way. And people just simply don't. Although I'm not sure I strictly agree with that, because like, I mean, I made this tweet on Twitter. In my area, rent has gone up 70% just in like the last sort of 6 or so years. It's absolutely shocking. Like the cheapest place I could find within 20 miles of where I live was a converted loft of a garage, which was literally just a sort of bedroom, kitchenette, and with in one room with a little bathroom on the side, and that was £600 a month.
Wow.
I mean, the housing market, as I said, like people just do not realize how bad the housing market's gotten in such a short period of time. It's in some parts of the UK, it's literally unlivable.
Yeah, in the sense that it's very expensive, and then what you get for your money is really bad value for money relative to other countries.
Yeah. And this was in the middle of nowhere as well.
In the middle of nowhere. I just think to myself, who really wants to have a family when you don't have a garden, when you don't have a dining room? What, you meant to eat dinner on your lap in front of the TV? This is no way to live. Mm. It's no way to live at all. You don't have a garden. Where are your children meant to play? How are you meant to socialize? How are you meant to entertain people as guests?
Totally right.
It is, you know, I don't think I'll ever come back to England, because I just, the quality of life is just abysmal.
Yeah. I think there was in the town where I work, actually, which is very rough. They had a 1-bedroom flat in actually one of the rougher areas of town with no parking, and that was £800 a month.
Jesus.
And then after that, I think the next place I saw was actually quite a nice bungalow, but even then it says like no pets, no kids. So
lovely.
And it's funny as well that you can do that you can't say, for example, no poles on your rental agreement, but you can say no children.
Yeah, no dogs, but Pakistanis are allowed. Yeah. Guys, before we stop, because I know Richard's got to go soon. 2 things from you. Worst thing that could happen in the next year, and the best thing that could happen in the next year, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, if you'd asked me this question sort of 2-3 years ago, I never would have guessed that it was as bad as it is now. So I really couldn't guess at what's going to happen in the next 2 years.
No. Where you are now, what's your opinion of the worst likely thing to happen and the best likely thing that could happen?
Best is this lockdown. This whole thing sort of just ends. Not lockdowns, but just the general hysteria.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it's very likely, but I agree with it.
I don't know what the worst would be.
Richard, worst thing you think could happen over the next year and the best?
I'm not sure about the worst, but I think the best thing that could happen that has a possibility of happening is the implosion of the Tory party. I mean, that's already sort of happening right now. And I must say that when the Tories lost that seat in Shropshire that they had held for 200 years, I mean, my Schadenfreude levels were off the charts. I was giddy. I was so excited and happy to see them flounder and fall like that. That in many ways it's quite unhealthy, but I really enjoyed that. And I hope that spells the end to this rotten party.
I kind of think that, like, for some time now, I mean, even to some degree going back to the era of Enoch Powell, but certainly going back to the pre-Brexit era, anyone with half a brain knows that the only way we're going to get a real right-wing party in Britain is to destroy the Tories. You just have to. I don't think they're reformable.
I think they're irredeemable. You can't redeem that party.
Yeah, I'd agree totally.
I think even as an institution, it's not worth saving, because I was thinking about, looking back at the Labour Party, at least that actually came out of humble origins rooted in a genuine desire to change things for working people, like normal people. But you can't say that about the Tory party. The Tory party has always been and always will be focused on preserving the status and interests of the upper crust, basically. So why would I try and salvage this institution? I'd rather try and salvage the Labour Party, really.
Well, I would never salvage those wings, but I would say that the last real Conservative Prime Minister was probably Lord Salisbury, like in the late 1890s and early 1900s. I don't think we've had a real Conservative Prime Minister since him, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty true, actually.
I mean, he kept Britain out of all alliances and just made sure the Royal Navy was so strong that no one could fuck with us. And to me, that's what a government needs to do.
I mean, probably the final point, but you literally can't even have isolation now, because every foreign war ends up coming here because of the different competing groups we've got living here.
Look, at some stage, Britain is going to have to reject people. I mean, like, if Britain's going to survive at all as real Britain, at some stage it's going to have to reject people. And hopefully that can be voluntarily and possibly paid. But one way or another, it's going to have to happen.
Yeah, forcible removal, right?
But at the same time,
I don't think.
No, I didn't say that, Matt. I said hopefully it will be voluntarily and possibly paid for. But I would say the other thing that needs to happen, which the right spends no time looking at all because it's inconvenient, is that there's no point in stopping mass immigration unless your own birth rates go above 2.1.
I am full of nothing but resentment and disgust, so I don't actually care whether it's voluntary or not. But I mean, as Richard said, it's probably not going to happen. Well, most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know I don't agree with that at all. I mean, like, things happen very radically, very quickly sometimes, and I do believe that at some stage that must happen. But unless your own Anglo-Celtic birth rates go up to at least 2.1.
I mean, that's a non-issue. You can fix that.
Well, no,
I don't even agree with that anyway.
Well, no, absolutely. All right, you may not agree with it, Richard, but like,
I don't want an England full of 60 million Anglo-Celtic people. There's too many.
No, absolutely right.
Are we going to finish this?
No, we are about to. But what I'm trying to say is, I would like to see England full of about 50 million Anglo-Celtic people.
Still too many.
No, I reckon that's about right. 50 million we could live with.
I think it needs to be about 30, really.
No, that's too small. Well, I think that's unrealistically small. But anyway, I think if you're going to look at Britain, and I'm not saying England, I'm saying Great Britain, so Britain, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, I think a population of about 50 million Anglo-Celtic people, and I wouldn't even care if, like, I don't know, 5% of them weren't Anglo-Celtic. But that's the kind of situation you've got to aim for. But in order to get that, you don't only need to stop mass immigration and possibly deport people. You absolutely have to get Anglo-Celtic birth rates up to 2.1.
That's literally a non-issue. It doesn't matter.
I think
it doesn't matter now, but I think it would if other things changed.
No, it doesn't matter, because if you wanted to fix it, or whatever path you took, if you had the ability to eject all of the sort of immigrants and immigrant descended peoples, getting the birth rates up or choosing to leave them where they are is literally a non-issue. You could do it in a heartbeat, whichever way you decided to go.
I hope you're right. Richard, any final words?
I just think it's awful just focusing on like this sort of numeric calculation of what a country should look like. I mean, even if England was like 100% English, I wouldn't want to live there with the kind of culture that persists there now.
Yeah, I granted. I mean, like, the culture I like is like, I don't know, 60 years ago, probably.
I mean, the whole value system. This is a global phenomenon that I don't think. I mean, I think this ship has sailed for nations personally.
Nah.
But I don't like what the UK is as a country, as a culture, what it values. I think it's awful.
Yeah, now I agree with you totally. But like, I can speak to people like you and Matt here, and I think we would be in broad agreement on what is good British culture. We disagree on details, but like broadly, we'd agree. If that makes any sense.
Well, I don't know, because this is the thing about. Sometimes I think to myself, am I really right wing? Because I don't really consider myself to be a traditionalist. I think you need to look towards the future. Be more pragmatic in your outlook, rather than, I think the right just has a tendency to sort of navel gaze in the past, and I think that's why reading old philosophers and old political theories is so in vogue, because the right is incapable of generating any ideas to move forward. It always has to sort of look back and sort of reminisce about past glories. Whereas I think to myself, no, I want to envision and create a future that we as a generation in this point in time can put our stamp on and be remembered for.
I think if you're elitist and hierarchical, you're right wing. I think that's like the only meaningful distinction.
Sure. I think you're right about that, Matt. But I mean, like, in terms of Richard's point there, I just think that, like, one of the reasons the right looks back to people in the past is because people in the past got shit right. I'm not one of these people who says, oh yeah, everything Evola said was great, because I don't think it was. But there were people on the right who did say correct stuff.
But traditionalism led us here.
I don't think it did, you see.
I don't think that's true.
I think liberalism led us here, which is not traditionalism. I'm not a liberal. I'm a reactionary traditionalist, I guess.
What the fuck does that mean? I'm a reactionary traditionalist. I mean, that is like, what does that even mean?
Well, it means exactly the same as if you said someone was a neo-reactionary, except it means more than that, because I'm a traditionalist.
These are literally nebulous terms that mean nothing, and they're just like, they're sort of right-wing virtue signaling sort of labels.
No. All right, you may say that, and I call myself a reactionary traditionalist because that's the closest I can come to what I am. Yeah.
I don't actually know in tangible terms what that even means.
Well, it would take us another stream to describe it, so we're not going to do that now. But I mean, we'll do it the next time we have a chat, maybe in 6 months or whenever you're willing to have one. But I would just say that I think the reason the right looks back to the past is because in the past there were some good solutions, and we didn't end up where we are now because of those solutions. We ended up where we are now because of liberalism, which had very little to do with any of them.
I kind of feel that liberalism was the inevitable end goal of the society that came before, though. But whatever.
Maybe
I'm going to need to go anyway because I need to.
Yeah, no,
get ready for work.
we're all going to finish anyway. I got one tune to play before we go out. Any final thoughts, Richard?
No, just I'm wishing everybody a happy Christmas and a good New Year.
Yeah, absolutely. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody. Same to you, Richard, and you, Matt. Ataman, anything final?
No. Same.
All right, guys, I'm gonna play us out, and this is a traditional British hymn. Oh, actually, a traditional British carol, I should say. All right, guys, that was a traditional English and British carol. Thank you so much to our guests this evening, Richard and Matt, for joining us. And I'll be back tomorrow morning at bloody hell, about 9 hours from now, to do a stream on Jonathan Bowden with Eddie Butler, who knew him well and was a friend of his. And we, as a channel, will be back at some stage in the new year. Go well, guys, and a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody.